Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It's Friday and we have made it to June. Only a couple more months until the NFL season. Dennis, are you getting ready? And how's your weekend looking?
I am getting ready. You know, I'm pretty excited. My weekend looks good. My home league draft is tomorrow. Starts at noon. So I think most of the league is meeting up. And, you know, right now, as I sit on the 101 on a rebuilding team, I'm trying desperately to trade back to the 102 because I just don't feel like I can pass on Bijan. But I'm probably not going to be ready to contend until 25. And so I don't feel like I can pass on Bijan at the 101. I also don't think he suits my team. And I don't necessarily want to, you know, I don't want to just leave him at 102 without trying to get some sort of return.
Yeah, I'm in a few drafts that I'm trying to finish up because I'm on almost on vacation mode, even though I have to work the next 2 days. We are ready to head out on our cruise on the open water. I'm sure I'll be thinking about my teams during my free time, but looking forward to getting a little break.
Just don't jump off the back of the boat on a dare.
Yeah, I'm not good with heights, so there's nothing about that appeals to me. I do like sitting back there though, because you can have some pretty views. But before we dive in today, Matt will be with us in a minute. We are going to continue our look at unit rankings. We'll be looking at AFC Pass Catching units. But there are a couple pieces of news. First, on Tuesday, we talked about Jimmy G, and he's already had foot surgery. I made a joke about Tom Brady being an owner player, but it turns out I must not be the only person that thought about that, because that has been a wave over the news lately as he's looking to buy a piece of the Raiders. Josh McDaniels came out today and said he wasn't worried about his quarterback situation. And Tom Brady, who, if he wanted to come out of retirement as an owner, would need the votes of 24 other owners, or other teams anyway, to be able to play, has said he has no intention of playing again. Dennis, do you believe Tom? And do you believe Josh McDaniels?
I believe Tom, and because I really do think that after last year, I feel like he's like, you know, maybe it is time. And at 46 years old, do I want to go and teach maybe he's only 45. I could be wrong.
I think he turns 46 before the season.
So do I want to teach a team how I run things? Because let's be clear, Tom Brady runs the offense when he's playing. He's at that stage now. They do it how he wants it done. But I don't believe Josh McDaniels, because I don't know that their quarterback situation is set. It's great that they put the clause in Jimmy G's contract that allows them to be able to get out. But, you know, get out for what? I mean, Brian Hoyer and Aiden O'Connell?
Speaking of which, have you seen the picture of Aiden O'Connell? There's a meme going around that said Aiden O'Connell looks like a poor man's Derek Carr in a movie made about Devontae Adams. He really does look strikingly like a young Derek Carr.
Well, guess we'll see. I mean, in the realm of NFL quarterbacks, is it really hard to be a mid Derek Carr?
In the other piece of news, Tony Pollard, who broke his leg in the NFC divisional round game, that says he should be cleared by the time training camp starts. Matt, who has now joined us, I'll start with you. Is that a good sign for Tony Pollard? He blankly stared at me. It must not be a good sign.
There we go. It wasn't unmuting for some reason. Yeah, it's definitely going to be a good thing. We expect him to be the starting quarterback for the the starting running back for the Cowboys this year. Obviously, with them probably not bringing Zeke back, they don't really
put it past him. He could start at quarterback some of those.
That's true. That's probably true. Come on, Dak's all right. We're not talking about like Zach Wilson, New York led Jets here. I think it's good to have him back. They've got, was it Malik Davis behind him? I think is an intriguing option. They don't really have a starting running back there. So I definitely think it's good for the Cowboys, who have shown that they really do like to mix the run and the pass quite close to that 50-50 line. They do pass a little bit more. But I think having Tony Pollard back and healthy is a great thing for that offense. Dak, the wide receivers, everybody.
Yeah. You want your players healthy, especially at the beginning of the season. And so getting him free and clear to practice by training camp is going to be beneficial. But I am under no illusion that they are not going to sign a veteran. I don't know if it's going to be after cuts, or I don't know if it's going to be one of the guys out there now, like Fournette or Kareem Hunt, or hell, even Zeke.
Supposedly they've been trying to see if Zeke will come back for less money.
Yeah. So somebody out there, one of these veterans out there is going to end up there. I don't know why Latavius Murray wasn't knocking on that door.
He got a job with the Bills.
Right. But he'd have been further up the depth chart.
They did sign a veteran. They do have Ronald Jones. Yeah.
Tough crowd.
Yeah, tough crowd. Well, that'll segue us right into AFC pass catching units. As I mentioned, if you were with us on Monday when we looked at the NFC, this includes both wide receivers and tight ends. This is the pass catching group. We're going to go 16-1, but first we're going to go 16-13. And Dennis, I will let you kick it off.
So I'm going to kick it off with the Houston Texans. I want them to grow, and they've got some guys. Whether or not they grow, we'll see. They drafted Xavier Hutchinson and Tank Dell. Robert Woods, I think, is going to be a nice veteran presence in their locker room. Nico Collins has some potential, but will he ever achieve it? He's a bigger wide receiver. Did I mention Tank Dell? I think I did. It seems like I'm missing one other veteran there. And then at tight end, they have some work to do. It's going to be another long year in Houston for CJ Stroud. I think they're on the right track. They have a decent offensive line. Damian Pierce is a pretty good running back. So they should be able, if the passing game can be productive, they may be able to stay in games because they can play a balanced game. I like where they're going. I think, adding Will Anderson to the defense is going to help them out some, and maybe keep them in position to not necessarily be throwing every single play to try and keep up. But they're pretty comfortably the number 16. At 15, I've got Tennessee. Now, that's something to say that the Houston group is pretty comfortably 16, but it's mostly, I like Treylon Burks' talent. I think he has the potential to be a high-end, maybe a mid wide receiver too. He's got a lot of potential there. Chigo Okonkwo flashed last year. Let's see what he does when he gets a bigger sample size, but he's shown himself to be a really effective receiver. the rest of that group is pretty, well, it's a group, but they do have a couple pieces with star potential in Okonkwo and Treylon Burks. At 14, I've got the New England Patriots. I feel like we're going to see something out of Tyquan Thornton this year. He seems like a great dart throw. He's, to use the tried and true term, he's feels like a great late round best ball target because it seems like he may be moving into that type of Will Fuller role that Bill O'Brien used in Texas. So that could have some potential there. I like their tight end situation with Gesicki and Hunter Henry. I do think Gesicki is probably going to be the more leaned on passing threat, but Hunter Henry had a good year last year. He's a good red zone threat, and it caused them. It was enough that they just completely moved on from Jonnu Smith, who they had signed first for just slightly more money. Next up, I've got the Ravens. I really wanted to have the Ravens higher. And it's a combination of their number one receiver being a tight end and then them being a low passing volume offense. I know it's, the end of May, the beginning of June, and there's lots of talk about, they're going to throw the ball. We've got Todd Monken at OC, and we're going to throw the ball now. I don't know how much more they're going to throw it. We've seen Lamar be really, really efficient in one season, but by and large, a wide receiver group of a almost 30-year-old Odell Beckham who can't seem to stay healthy, a third year, hasn't shown it yet, Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, James Prochet. I don't know who all the other cast-offs they have are there off the top of my head. That, kind of led me to put them at 13.
So at 16 for me, I had the Houston Texans. There's just nobody who stands out in this entire wide receiver room. In fact, the bottom two teams, I think you could argue, don't have a real alpha that you can kind of hang your hat on. I mean, you got Nico Collins, who people expect to break out. I mean, I just don't think it's going to happen. Maybe Nathaniel Tank Dell has a good season. It seems like him and Stroud are really connecting. Stroud really seemed to want him after he was drafted. He told the Texans to go get this kid. So it seems like he may have a good season, but I would be surprised if we see like even one of these players finish as a wide receiver 2 on the season. There's just not a real stud here. And it's the same thing with the New England Patriots, who come in at 15 for me. Like, I know they brought in Juju. We haven't seen the best of Juju.
I was missing.
We haven't seen the best of Juju since his time in Pittsburgh, unfortunately. Even in Kansas City, in what we would argue is probably one of the best passing attacks in all of the NFL, he was just okay. He was not great, and he was, at least in my opinion, the wide receiver 1. I know they have Travis Kelce, but he was still the wide receiver 1, just wasn't getting it done. I have high hopes that Kayshon Boutte will be able to return what he was in college, but I think that unfortunately we have to see it to believe it. They drafted Tyquan Thornton, who's really just a gimmicky wide receiver. Devontae Parker's never turned into anything. Its wide receiver core is just straight bad. Put the Tennessee Titans at 14 because at least they have someone that I believe in being an alpha, and that's Treylon Burks. I know that the rest of this core is really bad. Chris Moore, Reggie Robertson, Jacob Copeland, Nick Akini Westbrook, Racey McMath. I mean, none of those guys inspire any kind of confidence. And the tight end position is not really great either. I know Chigaquanko had a really good back end of the year last year, but I feel like he's just the next coming of Jonnu Smith. We saw these really nice plays from Jonnu Smith, a really athletic tight end. And he just wasn't able to keep it going. I need to see it from another year from Chig, but at least putting him in there at the tight end position with Treylon Burks gave me enough comfortability to put them above what the Patriots and what the Texans have, because neither one of those teams have a tight end that really inspires a ton of confidence for me either. And last but not least for me, at 13, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't love this wide receiver room. In fact, I think it's quite bad. Depending on what you think Christian Kirk might be, if he's able to bounce back, I almost had 1,000 yards last year. Maybe he went just over 1,000 yards with Trevor Lawrence. Was by far the best season he has ever had in the NFL. So maybe he's able to do it again. Calvin Ridley had a season with the Atlanta Falcons that was really, really good. He's been away from football for 2 years. Maybe it's easier to come back as a wide receiver and produce right away, but we saw how much that affected Deshaun Watson last year. While I think Calvin Ridley can be good, I'm not expecting it this year. I would not be surprised if he doesn't even have a wide receiver 2, probably has a wide receiver 3 season in him. But I just don't think that he's going to be that good. But outside of those two, it's Parker Washington, Seth Williams, Jamal Agnew, Kevin Austin. The only other person even worth mentioning is Evan Ingram, who I do think will have a phenomenal season yet again with the Jacksonville Jaguars. But for me, it was not enough to put really, Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram, who were the 2 main guys for me, above the teams ahead of them. I like the trios of all the teams ahead of them than those 2, because I just can't put Calvin Ridley there yet, which is why the Jags fall all the way down to 13 for me.
I'm disappointed in both of you guys. Disappointed. 16 for me is the Tennessee Titans. Maybe Treylon Burks will be good if he could play more than 3 games without breaking something or looking like he was out of shape. I might take him more seriously. And they have nothing behind him. Chigakonkwo had a couple of nice games down the stretch, but Tennessee has the most uninspiring pass catching core I think I've ever seen. There are probably half a dozen colleges that have more inspiring pass receiving cores than the Tennessee Titans. They also don't have much of an inspiring quarterback unit, so they were pretty much an easy write-off for me. I don't think the Texans are that much better when it comes to receivers. You're right. Nico Collins, I know a lot of people are excited that John Mechie III is supposed to be healthy and finally able to get on the field. We'll see. They signed Noah Brown, who was a nice role player. They drafted Dell and Hutchison. Robert Woods looked really bad when he was with Tennessee last year when he had a golden opportunity, so it's hard to make much of that. But I did like the signing of Dalton Schultz at tight end. I do think he's actually a good pass-catching tight end. He was very good for Dallas for the last 2 or 3 years. I don't know if it's a great spot for him, but I liked that better than Tennessee, which is below them. Then I had the Patriots. You're right. They don't have a whole lot. Juju was better than you remember last year. He did catch 88 passes. He finished as wide receiver 27, but he's their number 1. I think he's always been better as more of a complimentary receiver. They went and got Mike Gesicki. I'm curious to see if he paired with Hunter Henry gives them a little more pop at tight end. I don't think much of Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne. It's hard to know what Keyshawn Boutte is going to be. Tyquan Thornton didn't look great. So there are a lot of guys in New England, but not a lot of guys you feel that confident about. And then I'm like Dennis. I have the Ravens at 13. On paper, signing Odell Beckham Jr. is interesting, but we haven't seen him play in a little while. He's getting older. He's had a lot of knee injuries. Rashad Bateman, another guy, if he could play more than 2 or 3 games at a clip, it would be nice to see what he's got. But right now he's mostly paper potential. Then they have Zay Flowers. I mean, it's better than what they had last year. They're really only in this spot for me because of how much I like Mark Andrews. Matt, we'll go back to you for your 12 through 9.
Yeah, I mean, so I have the Ravens at 12, not much higher than you guys, but, Bateman was fine when he was healthy. And yes, we haven't got a chance to see that. And availability is the best ability. We can't necessarily predict injury. So I actually think this team probably deserves to be a little bit higher for all of us. Zay Flowers got first-round draft capital. He's probably going to be their slot wide receiver. And Mark Andrews, who I think we could argue is tight end 2 overall. And this is supposed to be wide receivers and tight ends mixed together. That definitely should count for something. I'm with you guys on Odell. As much as I love him as a player, I do need to kind of see it because not only the injury part, again, he's been away from football for over a year now. I just think that means more than some people give it credit for. So the room overall, I think, is really strong at the top with Bateman and Andrews. But then like after that, you're looking at Zay Flowers, Odell Beckham. I'm not sure what it really looks like, but the top end I think is pretty good for the Ravens. At 11, I have the Indianapolis Colts, and I really struggled with where to put them. I wanted to put them higher. I wasn't really sure. You've got Michael Pittman, who, I mean, he's a stud in my opinion. He was I think really held back because of bad quarterback play last year. He was really good. Was it Phillip Rivers a year before? He had a really good year. He had a chance to have an amazing rookie season before he had that really bad leg injury that, we were concerned he may not even be able to come back from. So the fact that he came back, played well, I think that he's going to be just fine. I think Alec Pierce is a good wide receiver too. And now that they have a quarterback that I think is going to be fairly interesting in, oh God, why did I forget his name? Anthony Richardson. That
Anthony
I think
Richardson.
he should be able to bounce back and have a much better season. He was also dealing with concussions and injuries last year as well. So if he stays healthy, in my opinion, you've got a nice 1-2 punch. We'll see what happens with Josh Downs there in the slot. I thought he was a really good player. He ended up not getting the draft capital. They've got a ton of tight ends. All of them are good. None of them, I think, are really any studs. I mean, we'll see. Jelani Woods had some interesting moments. I like Will Mallory. I need to see it before I really consider him to possibly be a hit. At 10, I have the Kansas City Chiefs, and a lot of this is 1,000% because of Travis Kelce. Because their wide receiver core is, in my opinion, really bad. Y'all can, the fantasy community can keep telling me that Kadarius Toney is going to be the wide receiver one. Okay, whatever. Y'all also told me Justin Ross is worth rostering, who's also still on this roster, and because he's catching passes from Patrick Mahomes, all of a sudden he's a worthy buy now. Sky Moore, great, was a really interesting pick last year, did absolutely nothing last year. I need to see it before I believe it. Cornell Powell, didn't realize he was still in the NFL. Jerrion Ealy is now a wide receiver. He was at one point in time in college a running back. So very interesting to see how that's going to work out. Ty Freifogel, cool. He's a special teamer. Like, there's nobody worthy on this roster outside of Travis Kelce, which I think should just show you how much respect I have for one Travis Kelce to still put him up here at 10. Because he's likely going to be the best receiving weapon out of everybody from the Chiefs down to 16, which is what are the Chiefs at? 10 through 16. And then last but not least for me is the Bills. And I'm going to same thing. This is a lot because of how good Stephon Diggs is. He's been amazing since coming over here. They really don't have any depth behind him. And I like Gabe Davis, but he has really become like a pure boom bust best ball target. Like, it's great if you have him on a best ball team because like the 6 times that he scores 20 plus points in your lineup, he's winning you weeks, but then the other times he's getting you like 5 points, and it's just not good. You can't trust anybody else. Khalil Shakir, Justin Shorter. I would have loved if they drafted Josh Downs because I think that would have been great. I personally think the pick of Dalton Kincaid was a horrible pick. I don't think that he's necessarily going to be that good in this offense. We'll see what happens, but him and Dawson Knox don't move the needle a ton for me. It's really Stephon Diggs. And then, if Gabe Davis can ever do something, maybe they'll be a little bit better.
All right. So I have the Colts at 12, and Matt put it pretty well. Michael Pittman Jr. is a top tier wide receiver. He's I'd put him in the top 15 probably with some potential. If you can get a quarterback that can get him the ball, he could have a huge breakout season. What's Anthony Richardson do well? He throws the ball downfield. I think that Pierce and Pittman both stand to benefit from Anthony Richardson when Richardson matures. That's going to be the big challenge, is Richardson maturing. I like Josh Downs. I just don't think what he brings to the table is necessarily a great fit with what Richardson does. I've got the Browns at 11. It's Amari Cooper. It's David Njoku. It's Elijah Moore. I think, there's talk they're going to sign DeAndre Hopkins. I don't know. I feel like we're kind of hoping Deshaun Watson can get back to that previous fantasy quarterback and kind of lift all the boats there in Cleveland. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. At 10, I've got Jacksonville. I like Jacksonville. I think, Zay Jones finished at wide receiver, was it 26?
26.
I think he was one ahead of the aforementioned Juju Smith-Schuster. I think he makes a really, really nice third wide receiver. We are banking a lot on Ridley playing to his potential of that one great season. And Christian Kirk, I think he was stretched being the wide receiver 1 last year. This year he moves back into his much more natural wide receiver 2 role, and I think he's going to continue to excel as that team continues to grow under Trevor Lawrence's leadership. And then Evan Ingram, I just slides right in there. I think it's a really good situation. My biggest challenge is I don't necessarily know if there's one guy you can hang your hat on as your fantasy point scorer. There could be you could be playing whack-a-mole from week to week with this group. Up above them, I've got the Raiders, and it's buoyed solely. Like my next 3 teams are literally on the back of one player. And I've got the Raiders at number 9 because of Devontae Adams. Let me see, what did I have here? They've got Hunter Renfrow. They've got Austin Hooper. They just don't have Jacoby Myers. They don't have a lot of other things that are really, really make you nervous. And then if Jimmy G craps the bed, he doesn't make it into training camp because of his foot, or even if he does, is he really a guy that's going to be able to support more than Devontae Adams? Probably not. And then I've got, my sheet says something different because I'm making a change. I've got Buffalo at number 8. I did have Kansas City, but I decided I was going to move Kansas City up a spot. So I've got Buffalo at number 8. It is really Stephon Diggs. And really, I really was going back and forth with the 2 of these. And what really kind of split the hair for me was Kansas City has 1,100 more passing yards in their offense. So we go back to Buffalo. I like Gabe Davis, but he's a wide receiver 3-4 with, like Matt said, inconsistency. Dalton Kincaid, I like the concept that they want to move to more 12 personnel, use a move tight end, a good receiver like Kincaid. But Dawson Knox was a pretty good receiving tight end as well. I just think he's a better blocker than Kincaid. The passing offense is all about Stephon Diggs, and it's going to keep being all about Stephon Diggs. So I've got Buffalo at number 8.
Okay, so for me at 12, I also have the Colts. I like Michael Pittman. I don't know yet what to make of Pierce Downs, and they signed Isaiah McKenzie. I guess we'll kind of see. And I'm like you guys, no one in the tight end room really moves the needle that much for me. At 11, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. A lot of the same reasons that Matt talked about. Travis Kelce is incredible, but I have little confidence in their kind of wide receiver group there. I agree with you. Kadarius Toney, maybe he will be the wide receiver 1 for them, the 1.5 games that he plays. But he wasn't super incredible with the Giants or really with them. MVS kind of is what he is. Sky Moore didn't even really get involved in the offense that much last year, so we don't know. Rashee Rice, they have a lot of guys, but we don't know what they're going to do, so they're a little bit lower for me. Then I have Buffalo at 10. I might be the lowest on you. I've enjoyed Buffalo. I would like to see them succeed. I love Stephon Diggs. The rest of them, Gabe Davis had a great chance last year, didn't show me much. I'm kind of with Matt. Knox and Kincaid, it's hard to know what we're going to get out of those guys. And then beyond those 2 receivers, they actually have even less probably than they did last year in their receiving core. It's Deontay Hardy. I don't know what we're going to get out of Khalil Shakir. They signed Trent Sherfield, who had a couple of moments for the Miami Dolphins. They drafted Justin Shorter. None of that really gets me too excited. And then at number 9 for me, is I have the Cleveland Browns. I actually like maybe their group more than Dennis does. Not quite as much as Matt did. I like Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore as the top 2 receivers. I like Njoku at tight end. I think they have good depth behind him with Harrison Bryant. Then they have some other guys that could fill some interesting roles. They still have DPJ. They still have Anthony Schwartz. They drafted Cedric Tillman. They have Marquise Goodwin. They have plenty of guys that can just run straight lines down the field really fast, which is exciting. And they have David Bell. I think all three of these teams that I just referenced in this range for me, when you have the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Browns, those seem to be the three leading contenders for Hopkins. Whichever one of those ends up with Hopkins would vault up these rankings. But right now, with the groups they have, this is kind of where I feel comfortable doing them. So we should be doing 8 to 5 right now. Dennis, I know you already gave us your 8, so why don't you give us your 7, 6, and 5?
Oh, did I skip somebody or did I just do an extra one?
I think you just did an extra one.
Oh,
Did you do the Raiders at 9?
I'm an idiot. All right, so at 8, I got Buffalo. I thought I did the Jaguars because I talked about Zay Jones.
Yep.
All right. I've got Buffalo at 8. I talked about them a moment ago. And then Kansas City. Patrick Mahomes passed for over 5,000 yards with that group of wide receivers, and he's got Travis Kelce. Kelce had a 28% target share last season. I don't see that changing. I'm hopeful for Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney from the perspective of they're going into their second year in the offense with this quarterback. I do have concerns about Toney staying healthy. He seems like a wild card off the field. I think we need to temper our expectations of Rashee Rice. And it wouldn't surprise me if Toney and Sky Moore both had 700 or 800 yards in receiving. The big reason is because they're just going to throw for so many yards. That's what they do. That's what Patrick Mahomes does. So they're going to throw the ball a lot. Somebody's got to catch it besides Travis Kelce. And so that's what bumped them up for me. I've got the Broncos at 6. It's, Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler, great in their roles, can be really productive. Hamler, maybe not, but Patrick coming back off the injury. He's 29 years old, I think, but they did sign him to an extension. Jerry Jeudy, for whatever reason, his hands haven't developed as well in the NFL as they seem to be at Alabama. And he struggled with injuries. And Cortland Sutton, his game seems to be tailor-made for Russ, but it didn't click like I thought it would last year. But then again, nothing in Russ's game really clicked last year. So we're going to blame Nathaniel Hackett with that. The only bright spot, I think, from last year was Greg Dulcich. He looked great, and he, as quote-unquote athletic as Albert O seems to be, Dulcich just came in and took the job away from him. So they've got weapons, and I think with Sean Payton, I know that they brought Troutman in. I'm not concerned with Troutman taking over the spot from Greg Dulcich. So I like the Broncos' weapons. I think they've got a nice arsenal to be able to move the ball. And with Javonte Williams sticking, maybe not being ready to start the season, it could really bode well for them if that passing game steps up. And then at number 5, I've got the Jets. The Jets, I love Garrett Wilson. He's my dynasty wide receiver 3. I see a big, big, bright future for Garrett Wilson. They brought in Aaron Rodgers, chip on his shoulder and something to prove. Couldn't wait to get out of Green Bay. Then they've added Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb, who should seemingly help the other receivers transition to playing with Aaron Rodgers. Tyler Conklin, I thought, was productive last year. And CJ Uzomah, we've seen him have big games. So they have a decent enough tight end room. It really all hinges on how fast Garrett Wilson can become, Jordy Nelson or Devontae Adams for Aaron Rodgers. I feel like Alan Lazard has had his shot. Alan Lazard is a wide receiver 3. I don't think New York necessarily has a wide receiver 2 yet. Maybe Corey Davis steps up into that role. Between Davis and Lazard, one of the two of them is going to get pushed into that role. I don't know that they're really ready for it, but Garrett Wilson, he's a good dude, man.
All right, so my 8 is the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they've got a lot of name value in this room. Production is not really there, which is why the Steelers fall all the way down here at 8. Still pretty good spot overall, though. It's really Deontay Johnson for me. I mean, Pat Freiermuth is a stud at tight end as well, probably top 7, 8 at worst. I think he could challenge for like that top 4 or 5. If he deals with these injuries and concussions, worries me a little bit. It's more the concussions. The injuries don't worry me as much. Concussions, like that's just not something you can really quantify. We talked a lot about it. We talked about the QB rooms with Tua Tagovailoa. But after Deontay, like I don't really think there's a name I trust in this room. I mean, George Pickens, I know he's a sexy name. He didn't really do as much, I think, as people think last year, and they want to blame all that on Kenny Pickett. Guys, he was that inconsistent his entire college career as well. Like, I don't think this is – it's not like George Pickens was this stud in college and then came into the NFL and just had one inconsistent rookie year. He's been an inconsistent player his entire life, and I kind of feel like that is exactly what he's going to be. I don't see him as like this stud 2. I actually think he was probably better as a 3 with Chase Claypool here. Claypool's gone. I love Calvin Austin. He's a smaller, diminutive wide receiver. I don't know if he does anything. You know, Hakeem Butler getting another shot, maybe. Still holding on hope right there. But outside of Deontay and Freiermuth, there's not a ton that I really love about this room. At 7 for me, it's the Raiders. I actually think this room is a little bit better than what Dennis said earlier. I mean, this is completely buoyed, really, really buoyed by Devontae Adams, who I still argue is a top 3 wide receiver in the league. But we saw Jacoby Myers at times was really good for the Patriots. And I think now that he comes over to the Raiders and is that wide receiver 2, that is really where he thrives. And I think that he will be very good for the Raiders as a 2. They also have Hunter Renfrow coming back in the slot, healthy. Dude finishes as a wide receiver 2 for multiple seasons. Like, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibilities. And then they do actually have, we've seen this Josh McDaniels offense feature really good tight ends. Well, guess what? They've got 2, in my opinion, that could thrive with volume in Austin Hooper and rookie Michael Mayer. Like, I actually think this is a fairly deep receiving group altogether. When you have a stud in Devontae Adams, you have a great 2 in Jacoby Myers, you have a great slot, volume monster in Hunter Renfrow, and then 2 good tight ends who could also fill into that spot in an Austin Hooper and a Michael Mayer. So I really like this Raiders room. I actually debated on putting them above the Cleveland Browns, who I had next, and the only reason I didn't discuss it with the Jets is because I just think the overall room of the Jets is really good. But the Browns come in next for me at 6. It's definitely buoyed a lot by Amari Cooper, who I've been the resident hater of him of the 3 of us for a while. But really that last season he had, the season before his last season in Dallas, he had a really good year. He was very good for the Cleveland Browns last year. We'll see what happens with Donovan Peoples-Jones. I'm still kind of iffy on what he really is. I don't think he's a good 2. I really think he's probably a really good 3. Will David Bell take a step forward? Elijah Moore, I don't think is great. I actually just talked on a podcast last night that I think you should sell him because of all the hype he's getting. We've never seen a Kevin Stefanski offense feature a slot wide receiver. I don't think it's going to happen now with Elijah Moore. Can Cedric Tillman step up? Whatever happened to David Bell, who a lot of us were high on. It's got some interesting names, but it's really buoyed on Amari Cooper and David Njoku, who I think is a little bit underrated. He's dealt with injuries and everything. Last year was, I believe, his most consistent season. We'll see now that he actually has a quarterback who can consistently throw the ball. I love Baker Mayfield, but I honestly think some of the coaching staff changes and everything really kind of screwed him up. David Njoku was having his best year the year that Odell, Jarvis Landry, and Baker were having their best years. I think having a competent quarterback in Deshaun Watson could help him rise up to being that top 10 tight end. And then number 5 for me is the New York Jets. And, I mean, Garrett Wilson is an absolute stud. I think that bringing over Alan Lazard is a good thing for this room. I think he will thrive as a good wide receiver 2 for them. He was kind of put into the wide receiver 1 role for Green Bay, and he was okay. He was not great. I don't think he was horrible, but he wasn't anything to really get excited about. But being that 2 opposite of Garrett Wilson, I think is a good thing for him because he's also got that chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. You do have, they brought over Mecole Hardman. We'll see Corey Davis still there. They also bring over Randall Cobb, which is Aaron Rodgers' guy. And I think a lot of this is being buoyed by my thoughts on Aaron Rodgers coming back. They drafted Jeremy Ruckert in the 2nd round a couple years ago. And Dennis, you're as a fellow Ohio State fan, you know that this guy can make some amazing catches on the field. He had an ankle injury last year, I think really kind of held him back. Dennis mentioned Tyler Conklin had some really good moments with a really bad quarterback in Zach Wilson. I think the improvement at quarterback, we could see one of these guys in this room step up, whether it's Jeremy Ruckert or Tyler Conklin, which again makes a really good 3. And a lot of that is buoyed by just my overall opinion of Garrett Wilson, how I think he takes another step forward this year, and then the fact they have a little bit of depth behind him.
Yeah, so you and me are the same for 8. I also have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Allen Robinson seems like an impressive trio when you list it, but Allen Robinson we saw seemed to find the cliff pretty quickly. Johnson and Pickens had their moments each, but it didn't seem to be an incredibly high volume pass offense back there with Kenny Pickett and Pat Freiermuth. I like a lot. They were good enough to be in my top 8, but I just couldn't put them any higher. One of the ones that I probably diverge from you guys the most is my number 7. I have the Miami Dolphins. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are great. I have both of them as wide receiver 1s in my dynasty rankings. They literally don't, in my opinion, have a tight end. Like Durham Smythe and Eric Saubert are their tight ends, and they don't really have any depth behind those guys. So like if one of those guys was to get injured, I'm sorry, you can miss me with chosen Robbie Anderson being a star in Miami. Cedric Wilson signed a big contract, did nothing last year. I don't see that changing. Braxton Berrios, River Craycraft, those guys just don't move the needle for me. They have 2 great receivers, but they have no depth. And when you're comparing them to me, for me, with these teams above them that either have good depth or have a good tight end and a couple of good receivers, it was just hard for me, as much as I think of what Hill and Waddle can do, to vault them above some of these other groups. Then I like the Jaguars more than you guys. I like Calvin Ridley more than you guys, I guess, a little bit. Last year, Christian Kirk was wide receiver 12. Zay Jones was wide receiver 26. I thought they were both pretty good. Calvin Ridley has been out for a couple of years, but in his first 3 years, he caught 217 passes and 26 touchdowns, over 3,000 yards. He was incredibly productive for the Falcons. He did have one mammoth year where he was 90, 13, 74, and 9. But he had 10 touchdowns as a rookie, 7 touchdowns his second year, 9 touchdowns his third year. He was consistently producing, and that was with him opposite Julio Jones when Julio Jones was actually kind of in his prime. So I think there's great potential there. I like those 3 wide receivers together, and I really liked that they brought Evan Ingram back. He seemed like a great fit there last year. So I just like the Jaguars' potential. And I thought that they've been growing. I like the way that they were trending with Doug Peterson, so I have them a little bit higher. And then I have the Raiders at 5. They have a nice trio of receivers there at the top with Devontae Adams, who's really great. I like the Myers signing. He knows Josh McDaniel's system. And then they have Hunter Renfrow. And I'm with Matt. I like their tight end room. Michael Mayer, I thought that was a great pickup. They have Austin Hooper. They went and signed O.J. Howard. I know that Matt probably just ranked him up there because of his love for O.J. Howard. But I think the AFC West, aside from the Chiefs, have some really incredible pass catching groups. So that's my 8 to 5. Matt, why don't you give us your top 4?
All right, so at number 4, I have your Denver Broncos. I still think that Cortland Sutton is going to be fine. Again, he coming back from that injury, I think you've got to give these guys a little bit of time. And let's just be honest, that offense was bad. It was not a good year. I think you have to almost give them just like a reset and see what's going to happen. It's completely new regime, completely new coaching staff, completely new play system, completely new everything but the players. And I think you've got to give them that opportunity to prove that Russell Wilson is what he's shown throughout his career and not what he showed us last year. So when you say that, Tim Patrick, who I really hope comes back. I mean, he tore his ACL in spring last year. He was a guy who I thought was going to have a really good season in this offense. Hopefully he's back to start the season. You got Jerry Jeudy, you got Cortland Sutton. I mean, you could argue that's one of the best trios right there in the entire AFC. And then you go and you add in the fact that they have at least intriguing names at tight ends, right? You've got Greg Dulcich. Maybe he does something. We talked a lot about how we thought the Albert O experience was not actually going to be a ride you wanted to go on, and it ended up being that. Adam Troutman, a lot of people had, high hopes of him going to the Saints. It's an intriguing rumor. It's not a guy that I'd really bet on there. But when you have those three wide receivers and you add in a Marvin Mims, who I did like, I didn't necessarily love the landing spot. KJ Hamler, like, to me, it's just a very good room with some solid depth outside of three top pieces. At 3, I have the Miami Dolphins. I mean, you don't really have to say anything else except for Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Mike. Is Mike Gesicki still there? Did I forget about that? Okay, he did leave. Okay, so
he's with the Patriots.
Oh, well, maybe I feel a little bad now. I probably would have rated them like one spot higher. Not really. But anyways, all you really have to say is Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill. They are two of the fastest wide receivers in the NFL. They are incredible. They don't have much behind them. Maybe, River Craycraft. Is it River Craycraft? Sorry, River Craycraft will be able to do something. I actually did like Eric Ezukama, who came out of Texas Tech. I don't think he's going to be anything. They don't have a lot of tight end, though. There is an intriguing player in Elijah Higgins, who was a wide receiver for Stanford. There were a lot of people who said when he came out that he should switch to tight end because of his blocking ability, his hands. He wasn't really quite that fast. It looks like he is doing that. Maybe he's a guy down the line that I can bet on. But really, it's just about those top 2 guys for the Dolphins. At 2 for me is the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, this one may be a little bit of a leap. I may be thinking, I may not be able to get like 3 years ago out of my head with how good Keenan Allen was, a healthy Mike Williams. But if both those guys are able to stay healthy, I think they're phenomenal talents, both probably wide receiver 2s at this point in their career. I don't know that either one gets to that wide receiver 1 level, but if they go down, you have a Josh Palmer and you have a Quentin Johnston. Quentin Johnston's a very intriguing rookie. I think those 4 alone makes this room really good. And then you go over to the tight end, tight end position for them. Gerald Everett was a very good player for them last year. And I wouldn't be surprised if he has another okay season for you here. I don't think he's going to be like a top 5, top 8 tight end, but could he finish top 10, top 12? Absolutely. So you're talking about almost 5 players deep in this receiving core that I think you could trust possibly having on your fantasy roster. And then number 1 has to be the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, both those guys alone, I personally would say they're the best duo overall in the NFL with what they can do. Then you add in a Tyler Boyd. Do you even need to go any deeper? I mean, I love the Denver Broncos top 3. This 3 is much better. Dennis did not like that fact. I think he's all in on the Denver Broncos. He decided to just leave. And then at tight end, I mean, you do have Irv Smith Jr. Maybe he's able to kind of take that step where we all hoped he was going to be able to. Outside of him, there's not much, but those top 3, I think, are just absolutely phenomenal.
I think Dennis said he is having a little bit of a computer issue.
Gotcha.
So if he does not come back when I finish mine, I will give you his top 4 and we can do the recap. For me, I almost looked at your list. This is the danger of having 2 people named Matt and one spreadsheet. I actually have the Chargers at 4. I like the depth of the group. You touched on a lot of things. I'm not maybe as high on Josh Palmer and Jalen Guyton as some other people. I like the Quentin Johnston pick. Mike Williams, I've given up on him staying healthy and having consistent production. He's a pretty boom bust guy. It's not that I don't like him. I just don't. I don't think he's ever going to be super consistent, and that may even be worse with Johnson if they start getting Johnson mixed in there. I still like Keenan Allen. And you're right, Gerald Everett is an interesting tight end. You got Dennis's guy, Donald Parham there. So that was good enough for me to put them in the top 4. I like the Denver Broncos group a little more than you guys. I have them at number 3. I like Tim Patrick a lot. He had, I still think he might be their best wide receiver in terms of hustle and heart and all these kind of things. I'm very excited to see him back. Judy, I don't think for him it's a matter of talent. I think it's been some of the mental game, and they found more ways to get him motivated and unlocked at the end of last season. I'm hoping that continues. I'm hoping to finally get to see Patrick, Sutton, and Judy in a good offense the way that we've been thinking there was the potential for the last 3 years between injuries and ineffective coaching. I like the Marvin Mims pick. Hamler, I think, is actually squarely on the roster bubble. They have Marquez Callaway back there, who had some good years for Sean Payton, who might be more of the veteran kind of guy that they're going to keep in there. They have some other punt returning options. Hamler has really struggled to stay healthy too. I love the pick when Denver made it. We just have never seen anything. I like their tight end room. I like Dulcich. I think adding Troutman and having Alberto gives them some options as well. Number 2 for me, I went the Jets all the way up at 2. I guess I'm more of a Jets fan than I even realized. I love Garrett Wilson. The depth of their room, you mentioned it. They signed Alan Lazard and Mecole Hardman. They still have Corey Davis. They have Randall Cobb. I'm with you. The Ruckert, Conklin, and then possibly Uzama. They have plenty of options all over the field. I think having Aaron Rodgers there is going to unlock some of those guys. So I thought that was a great move. And then I'm with you. The Bengals have to be number 1. They probably have the best trio when you throw Boyd in there. It's a toss-up for me whether it's Chase and Higgins or Waddle and Tyreek Hill for the best duo, in the AFC, but they have Boyd. Interesting signing of Irv Smith Jr. We've seen them actually use tight ends some the last couple of years who've kind of revitalized themselves and then moved on. We saw that with Uzama, who got the contract with the Jets. We saw that last year with Hayden Hurst, who now goes to Carolina. Can Irv Smith kind of capitalize? He seemed snake bit with injuries and then situations, never really got it going with the Vikings, but I thought that was an underrated signing. So they are my number 1 group. Dennis has not popped back up, so I will give you his top 4. He had the Steelers at 4. Like Matt, he had the Dolphins at 3 and the Chargers at 2 and the Bengals at 1. So Matt, why don't you really quick recap your 16-1?
Yep. So my 16-10, the Houston Texans, New England Patriots, Tennessee Titans, Jacksonville Jaguars, Baltimore Ravens, Indianapolis Colts, and then the Kansas City Chiefs. And then my top 9 starting at 9, the Buffalo Bills, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Las Vegas Raiders, the Cleveland Browns, the New York Jets, the Denver Broncos, Miami Dolphins, Los Angeles Chargers, and at number 1, the Cincinnati Bengals.
All right, so I will give you Dennis's 16-1 first. Dennis has the Texans at 16, the Titans at 15, the Patriots at 14, the Ravens at 13, the Colts at 12, the Browns at 11, the Jaguars at 10, the Raiders at 9, the Bills at 8, the Chiefs at 7, Broncos 6, Jets 5, Steelers 4, Dolphins 3, Chargers 2, and the Bengals at 1. And for me, I have the Tennessee Titans at 16, the Houston Texans 15. At 14, I have the Patriots, 13, the Ravens, 12, the Colts, 11, the Chiefs, 10, the Bills, 9, the Browns, 8, the Steelers, 7, the Dolphins, 6, the Jaguars, 5, the Raiders, 4, the Chargers, 3, the Broncos, 2, the Jets, and 1, the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think if we've learned anything, it's that the Cincinnati Bengals are really good at catching the football.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to do it for us today. If you have any spare time this weekend, we would love if you hop on and give us a rate and review on your favorite podcast platform. We also wanted to give you a scheduling note. We will be off the next 2 Mondays. That's June 5th and June 12th. Dennis and Matt have some things going on, and as I mentioned, I will be lost at sea. Matt and Dennis will hopefully be back with you next Friday looking at defenses, and then we will all be back together, Lord willing, on June 16th. But until then, you guys have a great weekend.